Good afternoon, and welcome to A2B Tracking's web seminar series. Today's topic we'll discuss is how RFID is rapidly changing asset tracking. My name is Peter Collins. I'm the founder and CEO of A2B Tracking, and I'm here with Darryl Layne, our Chief Technology Officer. We're going to explore why RFID should be considered when implementing automated asset tracking solutions. However, keep in mind this session is designed to be informal. There's going to be a back and forth dialogue between Darryl and I, and for anyone here who's participating in the audience, we welcome your questions. From a logistics standpoint, you can type your questions into the chat window at any time, in which case we'll take them in as they come, and hopefully Darryl and I can respond to those comments or questions you may ask and have you participating in the dialogue that way. Meanwhile, this session is being recorded, so after the fact you'll have a version of this that you can view or send around to your colleagues as you get a follow-up email from this session. So let me begin by reviewing the agenda for everyone here. And you knew this from the invitation or the sign-up landing page that you had found yourself at. But today we're going to begin by talking about barcode and how does that compare to whether that is the technology to be used for asset tracking, or is RFID needed in your particular use case or your particular environment. We'll also uncover what time asset tracking mean in the context of the use of RFID technology. What savings should be expected, or return on investment, as a lot like to refer to it as. Who really needs RFID? What kind of environments or what kind of businesses or operating environments could use it? And we'll get into some live Q&A if time allows at the end. We have no particular stop time on this, but generally we feel like this will be around a half-hour session.
Sounds good.
So to begin with, I'm going to give you a little bit about the messenger here in A2B Tracking for those of you who might be introduced to us for the very first time. A2B has pioneered military-grade and enterprise-class solutions to identify, mark, and track and report critical assets, and we've been doing this for over 20 years now. We do this by creating cloud-based asset tracking and data management solutions that incorporate advanced barcode and RFID technologies. The cloud-based allows us to seamlessly integrate and quickly deploy solutions wherever they're needed, with a lot of organizations who may have operations in different parts of the globe. Well, with the U.S. military experience in particular, we've processed over 6.5 million of the DoD assets, which represents about a quarter of the assets that are being tracked and reported to the government IUID registry systems around the world. We mobilize field teams to identify and mark mission-critical assets, as well as verify the existence and completeness of those records to make sure that when you're starting on this journey of asset tracking and automating this process, you have a clean database to start from that is accurate and up-to-date that enables this ongoing asset tracking capability. Our real goal here, in addition to deploying these technologies, is to make sure that you have the most accurate, up-to-date asset data that represents a real picture of the physical world and the assets that you're responsible for, so they can easily be tracked and inventoried and audited and often reported to either internal systems or other government systems if you're inside that environment. So let's get into it. Let's begin with the topic here. Darryl, I'm going to ask you some questions about barcode versus RFID. Okay. So if you could take a moment to give some insight to the key differences between what it means to leverage or deploy a barcode asset tracking system and that of an RFID asset tracking system.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Peter. I'd say, you know, the first thing I'd like to mention is with the barcode technology that many people are familiar with. It's been around for many, many years in many, many industries. You're working with assets or items, generally one at a time. If you're out doing a physical inventory or a cycle count, you need to locate this asset, hit it with the barcode reader. This asset, hit it with the barcode reader. So it's very one off. Whereas with RFID, you can you know at the lowest levels of the technology, it is one off, but things happen so rapidly. It gives the user the appearance that they're doing they're inventorying many assets in a matter of a few seconds. As well with barcode, it's a very line of sight, and I really need to basically be very close to the asset generally in order to accomplish the task that I'm trying to accomplish. With RFID, I can read hard to reach items, embedded items, hidden tags, things that might be in a case or a cardboard container. We were talking with a third-party logistics company just this week. They deal with clothing for the retail industry, where they take in a lot of material or assets from an assortment of companies that they then, upon order placement, have to ship directly to their stores. And their challenge with being in a big space and being able to find everything they need to fill the orders, certainly in a timely fashion, inventorying things with the barcode solution they have in place today. Cases need to be opened. Each item individually has to be inventoried. And with the RFID capability, they don't have to open all these cardboard boxes. They can inventory pallets of stuff very rapidly. They can inventory very hard to reach items without having to use a forklift or a high ladder to get an individual up there. So tremendous savings in time when you implement the RFID capabilities.
Can you quantify that? I mean, what kind of speed enhancements would they get with something like RFID, versus barcode?
I mean, every circumstance is different, but I think just for a rule of thumb, I mean, I certainly feel comfortable saying 10 to 1. If it would take me an hour or 10 hours to inventory a warehouse of X square feet, I would say I could certainly do it in an hour with RFID, probably faster.
Okay. Wow. So I also know in particular that you were on a site visit earlier this week, not at that location that was handling the apparel and garments, but at an organization that had a warehouse full of hard goods, of machinery and equipment that they were tracking that needed to be tracked uniquely, right? So talk about that experience for the moment and what you noticed when you were doing the site visit about the way they were doing it and the way that you could envision them taking advantage of RFID.
Yeah, the organization deals with a lot of industrial equipment, and they sell it. They sell this equipment, and they have a need to perform inventories as well as a lot of other functions within their warehouse facilities, such as maintenance, inspections, taking pictures of the items as well. And as things are moving throughout their warehouses, they're having, again, a difficult time continuing to keep track of them. And with the volumes, that's another reason why a company may want to look towards RFID if they don't have any type of tracking system, or if they're using barcode today. As volumes really get high, it's hard to do all of the workflow or processes that the organization wishes to when you're doing it manually or you're doing it one-off. And leveraging RFID can help you get through those tasks much quicker. You can perform the task much more frequently. Rather than doing an annual physical inventory, perhaps they can do an inventory once a month, which is going to give them much greater asset visibility and a much greater likelihood that they're going to be able to understand where, when the system says an asset is in a certain location, much greater likelihood that it will actually be there when they go to get a hold of that asset.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll add that, when it comes to processes that require, a discipline like barcode tracking or RFID tracking, the easier it is to do, the more frequently and the more likely people are going to do it and do it completely, right? And that only
Correct.
improves accuracy at the end of the day, and that's what this is about, getting that accurate picture of what's in your custody and within your control.
Absolutely. And, organizations have benefited from being able to grow their business without adding additional staff to perform these functions. So a lot of terrific benefits.
Okay, good. Well, let's keep moving along to this concept of real-time tracking. With RFID, a lot of people do refer to tracking capabilities that will give them real-time visibility, and I'll quote, real-time visibility into the movement of their assets. But with certain RFID technologies, that may or may not be the case. Speak to that and help us understand, particularly with the kind of technologies that we're talking about here, what does real-time really mean?
Yeah, and to be clear, today Peter and I are talking exclusively about passive UHF RFID, passive RFID tags. And with that technology, in many circumstances, it is it is possible to achieve essentially a real-time locating system, depending on the square footage of the facility we're talking about and the types of goods we're talking about. But with fixed RFID readers and antennas, throwing enough RF at, a warehouse or a shelf full of stock, you can continuously read these items on a periodic basis, whatever makes sense for your business requirement, whether it's every second, every hour, 4 times a day, whatever it may be. And then the back-end system will reflect that these items have been inventoried on those periodic occasions, and you can see that the assets are where they're supposed to be. And you can also set up alerts and application level events so that if the item is moved and it's not inventoried for a certain period of time, you can be notified of that fact, and then you can understand that the item's been moved. With setting up choke points and portals as pallets in a warehouse are moving through a doorway or an overhead door onto or coming off of a truck or in an 18-wheeler trailer, the assets can be read as they move through, and the staff in the facility doesn't have to do any additional work. They don't have to be thinking about doing things differently than they do today. They can continue to do things as they do, and now we're getting all this electronic data about the movement of assets. We have a complete electronic record of where things went, when they went, etc.
Let's talk about a military example for real time. And I know, at A2B here, significant amount of our deployments are within these very challenging military environments. Talk about one of an ID installation in a military scenario to relate this kind of the real time concept, or what they would expect to be, real visibility into the movement of critical items.
Yeah, we've done work in military armories to track weapons and other assets, NVGs, scopes, radios, etc. And the challenge that the armories were having is as shifts change, and the custodian in the armory one is leaving a shift, one's coming on a shift. There was a desire to inventory the entire armory, however large it may be, so that we can have a complete accountability for the assets that are in the armory and assets that have been checked out. And doing that in a manual fashion or with a barcode solution was just too time consuming, and they were not able to achieve that level of detail. And so there was a lot of discrepancies when assets were missing or couldn't be accounted for, who really was the responsible party. And with the RFID technology implemented with mobile RFID capability, they were able to inventory all of the weapons cages in a very short time, 10 or 15 minutes. So as the shifts were changing, the custodians could change. We knew everything that was in the inventory as an individual shift started. And then at the portal windows where the weapons are checked in and checked out, they were set up with fixed readers and antennas. So as, again, things went in or out of the armory, that was captured electronically. And again, in the back end, we have an electronic record of who, what, and when, and where items came and went. And we have a full reporting capability, so we can see all of the movements and how long things were checked out, who checked them out, who they were checked out to, etc.
Well, as the systems were going into these kind of environments, particularly with armories, I can imagine with a lot of metal, there's a lot of kind of real-world interference and challenge to get the performance of the RFID, perhaps read ranges and reliability. What are the challenges that you found going into that kind of environment, and how did you overcome them?
Well, certainly environmental issues when you're dealing with RFID projects can be a problem. With the portal windows, we had no issue there, as those, the equipment cages were back away from where the windows were. And in this particular situation I'm talking about, the inventories of the cages were done with a handheld, which really, alleviated the challenge of trying to outfit the cages with shelf-level technology to do this continuous real-time type of inventory, because that really wasn't a needed requirement with the fact that they could do a full physical inventory in 10 or 15 minutes with the mobile units. But environmental factors are certainly a big challenge. Large equipment, a lot of steel, liquids, and things of that nature can be a problem. Sometimes in secure facilities, computer rooms, they have the walls lined with steel, and then there's a desire to track the IT assets in the data center, all of the blade servers, etc. So you can get challenges with that, with the RF really being, bounced around in a fashion that's not conducive to good tag reads. So those types of things really need to be looked at. On site visits, we'll get out, perform what's known as a spectrum analysis, so we can kind of analyze the environment and try to determine, we know what a good, clean environment looks like. Try to determine if there's anything about this particular environment that's going to impact the RF that the solution is going to be dependent upon to deliver the desired results. And if we identify things, we try to determine if there's something that can be done about it to improve the situation. And if not, go from there and see what other options might be available.
Okay. All right. Well, I think the interesting point too about the armories is that there's the balance between how much fixed reading with real-time capability versus where you can leverage also a mobile computer with a minimal amount of labor to get the same kind of visibility, but with a slightly different frequency, right? Because you're not going to have soldiers walking up and down scanning these armories continuously, but you can do it quickly whenever there's a staffing change, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's now turn our attention to the return on investments and talk a little bit about the investment it takes in getting these kind of systems deployed. And also, where is the return coming from, whether it's labor or whether it's other kind of tangible or intangibles that an organization can expect?
Yeah, we try to work very closely with the organizations to get some metrics or parameters to help cost justify these solutions. And, RFID solutions, just like any technology implementation, whether it's a large Oracle implementation or SAP, the price tag can be, very varying. An RFID implementation could be, as small as perhaps $10,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars if we're trying to outfit a large warehouse with a lot of fixed equipment. So there's certainly implementation of that fixed equipment, a lot more training perhaps may be required. And, ROI, return on investment, when trying to determine that, you got to look at the labor savings, the ability to deploy staff to do other, perform other tasks that could perhaps benefit your business better than some of the manual inventorying, cycle counting. It can certainly benefit speed and time in other warehousing activities such as shipping or receiving, or putting items away. To one of the use cases I spoke to earlier, to find items that may be misplaced and not in the location that they're expected to be in. You can achieve a higher degree of accuracy, etc. So many benefits there, Pete.
It's interesting. You bring up kind of an operational view of where the benefits lie. And I'll comment here that it seems like when we're speaking to those running an operation or logisticians of any kind, they're focused on what items they have, what's the state of readiness of those items to either go to customers or, meaning a military mission, be deployed. And the real the labor involved in doing all of that, right? And the savings can be recognized by the reduction of labor a lot of times. However, when we're dealing with what I'll call the C-level or the higher level inside an organization, particularly for commercial businesses, they're looking at the return by way of perhaps something such as customer service or the ability to leverage an improved brand in the eyes of their customer using more modern technologies to show that they're tracking the assets of their customers in real time or near real time, so that the customers realize that they can walk in and maybe see the item that's going through a repair cycle, and they could know exactly where that item is in the cycle and how much longer it's going to take for them to get their item back if they've returned something for a repair, as an example. And let me comment on that a little further, where we were dealing with a company where their number one job was to service aftermarket items. And a lot of customers would come walking into this location. And as they walk in and they'd say, okay, where's my item? I want to take it away. It's been a couple weeks. Sometimes it took as much as half an hour to an hour just to find the item for those people running the operations, which had a serious amount of customer embarrassment. And also sometimes they had to tell the customer, you got to go away, come back for the item when we finally have identified it, even though it perhaps maybe was repaired by that point. So having that angle of looking at both your brands and what this technology will do for it, as well as the customer service imperative in supporting your customers or the constituents that need insight into where these items are, can be a big gain too.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you can do things quicker and more efficiently, and as you described, if the customers are actually exposed to your operation and they see this technology in action, it's certainly a plus for your organization and perhaps a advantage over your competitors.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the final topic, which is who needs the technology. Are there certain businesses or industries that you see, or even operating environments that can best take advantage of it? And maybe on the flip side, those that you really have found significant challenge in implementing RFID.
Yeah, I think we talked with many companies that have a desire to track IT assets. So IT asset tracking, we've as you said, Pete, government agencies, many commercial businesses, universities, warehouses in terms of shipping and receiving of assets, put away, doing inventory, cycle counts. Uh, uh, Businesses where you're dealing with returnable containers. You put, something in a container that's ultimately going to come back to you. Those types of operations can be escalated and expedited with RFID technology. We've worked closely with a rental company who rents a lot of equipment, allows them to get their orders picked and staged much quicker, get orders on the truck, heading out much quicker, accounting for inventory coming back as it's coming off the truck much quicker. And again, the ability to just do many more inventories than they otherwise could without the technology has given them better accuracy. They're getting tremendous amounts of data in terms of, electronic data in terms of how many times things are being rented, how long they're being rented, so that they can keep their stocking levels at optimal levels for where their business is today. So a lot of terrific advantages there, and with those examples.
Good. Okay. Any other challenging environments where you said, well, you got to be really careful about how you approach it with implementing this technology?
Yeah, we've worked with customers that have large electronic equipment and machines to perform different functions, and sometimes that can be a challenge with the environment.
Why is that?
Particularly if you're putting in fixed readers, because the antennas that are trying to throw the RF to track, whether it's hand tools or what have you, the signals can be impacted and redirected and not not able to get to the assets that they need to, just because there's a large piece of machinery that's 5 feet wide in steel and 10 feet high. So then you really need to be real particular about antenna placement and reader tuning, tag selection, and many variables come into play.
Okay, good point. Okay, good. Well, we're going to move on to Q&A here. Let me see if there are any questions that are coming in. Let's see. So, how long does it take to install the technology?
Again, back to what I said a few moments ago about the potential costs of a solution. It can be, if it's a pure mobile play solution, it could be implemented in a couple of days, and then to a large warehouse implementation where you're trying to build portal technology across 30 overhead doors and all the physical equipment that needs to be implemented on top of the software as well, and additional training. It could be could be a month or two.
Okay. All right. Another question here. Can you describe the installation process?
Well, installation process, if we're talking about using fixed antennas and readers for a large area, generally we like to get on site to do a pre-site analysis, understand the organization's workflows, understand what their challenges are, and what has them out looking for a better solution. And then we try to come up with the right design, and then the design would be part of what we would deliver as a part of the site visit. And again, the time can be, it really, it's going to be dictated by the size of the project. But the typical approach is the design's done, it's agreed upon by the customer, and then if we're going to move forward, we do stand up the software. It's cloud-based software. It stands up in the A2B cloud. We'll acquire all of the fixed infrastructure that's needed. We'll implement that, tune the hardware, tune the software, and make it, get it working as a cohesive unit and system, and go do the implementation with our professional services team, do the training, provide all the necessary documentation, and get you a full solution that's going to get you up and running as quickly as possible.
Well, so with all that being said, when you're on the customer end of it, what kind of people need to be involved, and how much time would it take of the customers in order to get a deployment to where it needs to be?
Well, if we're installing a lot of fixed equipment, maybe a facilities manager, generally we're going to install an A2B appliance to run the middleware for the fixed readers needs to run locally. So, an IT type of person would be required. And then someone obviously from the operation to talk about what items need to be tagged, and again, the workflows, business processes, and how that's all going to fit together needs to be worked out. So generally, those are the types of roles and types of people we would need to work with.
Great. Okay. Good. Good. Okay, we're going to keep moving here, and let me show for everybody just a little bit of background on A2B, so you get a sense of the kind of depth and experience we have as a company. Established back in 1994. We're over 22 years old in operating as a business. We have worked with significant depth in both the commercial world, but even more recently in the military environments. The Pentagon's need to track and account for assets and report on those assets through to Congress in order to achieve auditability and do a better job with logistics all come into play here, and we've been deeply involved in helping to set the standards and the path that the Department of Defense is taking along those paths. Meanwhile, we've deployed millions of asset identifiers, both in the form of barcode and RFID tags. We've processed millions of assets and are continuing to process every day based on our UC Web software, which is the cloud-based software, Darryl, that you noted a moment ago. And our program support allows us to go in, deploy the technology, and support asset identification and data cleansing in order to establish that initial baseline and put all the infrastructure in for ongoing scanning, tracking, readability, so that the users and those who need to know where assets are have that access and can see assets as they move throughout their facilities. Today was just a primer. We're going to continue to do more of these kind of informal discussions. We appreciate everybody's participation, and hopefully you got some value out of it here. If you would like some further dialogue on this, we ask you to reach out to us. We'd be happy to provide some free consultation to learn a little bit more about your environment and comment on where we think RFID technology could work for you, even if it could, and if it doesn't, maybe what kind of challenges you need to be identifying to know whether this is something that actually is in fact a fit for you. We've had wonderful success for this technology. It really is the next wave of auto ID, and it should be considered every time you think about embarking on an asset tracking project and putting the infrastructure to gain that visibility. Darryl, thank you for your time, your valuable time here, and hopefully we can do more of these.
Terrific.
All right. Have a great day.